Hey guys, this is Holland with the Wolverine.com, and Michigan just scored a huge win on the recruiting trail. Before we dive into that, I want to remind you guys to subscribe to the Wolverine.com today for just $10 until next football season. That gets you premium insider recruiting information, team information portal, NIL, basketball recruiting, and even more, all for just $10 until next football season. That's $10 until August of 2023, and you get to be part of a great message board community over on the Fort. All of that at thewolverine.com for just $10. If you're already a subscriber, you can gift a subscription just in time for Christmas. All right, guys, Michigan did land a whale on the recruiting trail in on 300 cornerback Jyaire Hill, ranked as the number 112 overall prospect nationally, the number 15 cornerback in the country, and the number 2 overall prospect in the state of Illinois. Michigan has been working overtime to land Hill over the last few months, and they finally were able to seal the deal. This has actually been an ongoing battle for basically a year now. Hill is from Kankakee, Illinois, which is about a little more than an hour south of Chicago. So, Illinois was a big factor here, being the home state program, Kankakee not being that far away from Champaign. Brett Bielema did a great job of personally recruiting Hill, and their former defensive coordinator, Ryan Walters, was also playing a big role before he departed to Purdue to become their head coach, and obviously that played a factor in helping Michigan as well. But let's go ahead and go back to the beginning of this process. Like I said, this has been a battle that has lasted for almost an entire year. Michigan took the early lead for Hill going into January. Ron Bellamy was the safeties coach at the time and his primary recruiter, and was doing a fantastic job with Jyaire, as was Courtney Morgan, Michigan's former director of recruiting. Of course, you had Ron Bellamy switch from safeties to wide receivers. You had Courtney Morgan depart off to Washington. And not only that, you had the Jim Harbaugh NFL flirtation, which lasted a couple of months. Hill actually made a visit to Michigan along with his family during the height of the NFL talks, which didn't necessarily sit well with Hill's mother. And I think Hill had a little bit of pause there that allowed Illinois to really make a big run. From that point on, Steve Klingscale took the primary recruiting position with Jyaire Hill. Jesse Minter, Michigan's defensive coordinator, got more involved in his first year with the program. So he rebuilt relationships with Minter and Klingscale, or relationships that really weren't there because they weren't too involved in this process early on. And from that point, it kind of just seesawed back and forth from Michigan to Illinois. There was one point in the summer where I changed my pick. I had put a pick in for Michigan very early in the process, and then I changed my pick to Illinois. It seemed like he was very close to committing there. And then Michigan regained momentum a month later, and then Illinois regained momentum a month later. So it was just constant back and forth. I think this recruitment really shifted when Hill made his last unofficial visit of the fall to Michigan for the game against Illinois. It just happened to be a victory in thrilling fashion over the Illini. But I think that visit really sold him. And in fact, that is when I put in another prediction for Michigan, my final prediction. So I put in a prediction for Michigan that weekend for the Wolverines to land Hill. That visit is the first time I feel like Hill really bought into the family pitch at Michigan and what Michigan can do for you on and off the field. Before that, he talked constantly in interviews about having really good relationships with the Illinois staff, how they were a little more fun and personable than the Michigan staff. But at the end of the day, I think on that visit, Hill realized that college football recruiting and college football in general is a business. And while relationships still matter and are first and foremost in recruiting, it's still a business decision. And I think he understood that Minter and Klingscale aren't really his friends. There's coaches, right? That doesn't mean he didn't connect with them well. He did, but he also understood why they weren't just being his friends. Maybe like the Illinois staff was. So I think he saw, hey, there's a balance here at Michigan. They really do practice what they preach in terms of family. He got a chance to talk to some of the players on the team, hung out with Michigan great Denard Robinson, who is obviously now on staff. They went bowling together. And I think Hill really saw how well Clinkscale, Minter, Jim Harbaugh really not only commanded the respect of the players on the roster, but also the love. And that's not, I mean, that is the right word, the love of the players. I mean, players love to play for Coach Harbaugh. They love to play for Klink. They love to play for Minter. And that's apparent with the on-field results. And Hill saw Michigan beat Illinois. He saw them go to the college football playoff again, win another Big Ten title. So he knows that the development aspect is there. And another thing Illinois pitched throughout the recruiting cycle was early playing time, coming in and being the guy. And I don't think he really bought into potentially being the guy at Michigan until around that visit as well. He finally really saw the need for cornerback depth. Yes, Michigan had a historic haul in the secondary last cycle, but a lot of those guys are safety types, with the exception of a Will Johnson, who's obviously making an immediate impact as a freshman, which definitely caught Hill's attention as well. But aside from Will Johnson, if Michigan loses Jamon Green, if they lose DJ Turner, they're going to have an open spot. And yeah, there might be a guy added in the portal, but Hill will have a chance to play significant time, much like Will Johnson, as a true freshman. And I think that really resonated with him. And knowing he can be developed, knowing Klink's track record, knowing Michigan's NFL production versus Illinois' NFL production, Jim Harbaugh's NFL experience versus none from the Illinois side, as well as Michigan's academics. Now, Illinois is a good school as well, but Michigan is an elite school. And so having the best of both worlds, finally seeing that depth chart aspect, finally getting that family feel at Michigan, I think pushed him over the edge. And I thought Michigan did a great job down the stretch with his mom, who seemed to be leaning towards Illinois for a lot of the process. Jim Harbaugh made an in-home visit, and I think was able to do enough to win her over as well, as evidenced by the commitment. So again, I think Hill is a huge land. It was one they were working on for a long while, put in overtime, especially in November and into December. And they sealed the deal with one of the most important remaining targets on the board. And I absolutely love Hill as a prospect. You guys know, if you follow the Wolverine, Hill's one of my favorite guys in the class. Actually, I first saw him as a junior right after Michigan offered him, and at the time he wasn't a very well-known prospect. He wasn't even ranked. I'll just be completely honest, because who cares at this point? I actually talked to Courtney Morgan about Jyaire, and he said, go watch this Jyaire Hill kid play. And I was like, all right, man, I'll go watch him play. And I went out to the south side of Chicago, where they barely had functioning lights in the stadium, and Hill was an absolute monster. He returned a punt for a touchdown. He played wildcat quarterback and took one to the house from 50 yards out. He made several plays on defense, and this was all in the first half, and they had a running clock, so I made my way over to the second half of Kenneth Grant's game. But that first half, just seeing Jyaire Hill live for the first time, it was like he had that wow factor. It was like, man, this guy is so explosive, especially on the offensive side of the ball. He was arguably the best offensive player in the state of Illinois over the last couple of years. But that explosion, it transitions over to the defensive side of the ball. You see the closing speed. You see the plays he makes on the ball. You see him line up at safety and just punish people. He has a lanky, he's listed at 185. That's a skinny 185. He has the frame to pack a lot of muscle. I'm really excited to see what Ben Herbert does with him once he gets to Michigan. But like I said, the closing speed, the ability to make plays on the ball, just the ball skills, the natural instincts are all there for Jyaire Hill. The height, the length at 6'2.5", those long, rangy arms, he uses that to his advantage. Plays a lot of safety for Kankakee. but moves all over the secondary, plays in the nickel, has experience playing as a pure cover corner. I've seen him at practice on multiple occasions. I saw him in a game again later on in his junior year. I saw him in another game this year as a senior. So I've seen Jyaire run track. So I've seen this guy live many times, and he's just a really impressive athlete. On top of being 6'2", 185, and having all the physical traits I just mentioned, he's also a guy with 10.87, 100-meter speed. He led Kankakee to the state track meet this past year as a junior, and that speed translates on the field. I wouldn't be surprising to see Michigan use Hill on the offensive side of the ball as well, at least getting him a few touches every now and then, because he's that dynamic and explosive of an athlete. And he's a perfect complement to a guy like Will Johnson, who's just an overbearing physical prospect that has terrific patience and plays with great technique. Hill is a little bit more raw than Will, but I think Hill is more dynamic of an athlete and definitely faster. You see the track speed. So I think they would complement each other really, really well. And I think that's a dynamic duo that's going to have Michigan fans excited for years to come. But I absolutely love Hill. I mean, he is my highest graded player in the class. Not even really all that close, to be completely honest. I think Michigan got an absolute stud here. It was awesome to see Michigan finally seal the deal and beat out Illinois. And I know for those that don't follow recruiting closely, you might think, oh, well, they just beat out Illinois. Like, Illinois did a terrific job here. It was the home state school, but Jyaire had offers from Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Florida, Penn State, Oregon, Michigan State, Auburn, Washington, UCLA, etc. So there were a lot of other major P5 programs after him, but he knew he wanted to stay close to home, and it was always Michigan or Illinois. But Michigan was finally able to overcome some of the issues. They fixed their recruiting approach. This was more of one of the most impressive wins of the cycle, right up there with the Evan Link and Eno Etta recruitments. All right, guys, for more Michigan recruiting news, subscribe to thewolverine.com today for just $10 until next football season. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That is completely free. It helps with the algorithm. See you guys next time. And again, subscribe to thewolverine.com today.